Good evening, everybody, and welcome to this Masters in Surgical Science and Practice online information webinar, essentially. I'm delighted to introduce myself and Professor Oscar Traynor and Dr. Shahir Khan, who will be guiding us through this session today. My name is Martin Corbally, for some of you who don't know me. I'm head of surgery here in Bahrain, in the Popular Surgery RCSI, and also Chief of Staff at King Hamad University Hospital. I'm very pleased and delighted to introduce Professor Oscar Traynor, who is the Dean of Postgraduate Surgical Education and Professor of Postgraduate Surgical Education at the Royal College of Surgeons in Ireland. In this role, he has been responsible for introducing several innovations to surgical training in Ireland, including the world's first e-learning programme for surgical trainees, a comprehensive curriculum-based surgical simulation program for teaching technical skills, and an integrated human factors training program. He has published widely on various aspects of surgical training and has also lectured extensively on the subject of human factors in surgery in Europe, Australia, and North America. He recently retired from clinical practice as a surgeon at St Vincent's Hospital, St Vincent's University Hospital, Dublin, where his clinical interests were based around hepatobiliary and pancreatic surgery, including liver transplantation. For more than 25 years, he headed up a very busy hepatobiliary unit in St Vincent's Hospital and played a leading role in developing the national liver transplant program in Ireland in the early 1990s. The hepatobiliary unit at St Vincent's University Hospital in Dublin is the sole national tertiary referral centre for liver transplantation and for pancreas cancer surgery in Ireland. He's also Director of Clinical Governance at the Hermitage Medical Clinic in Dublin, a post he has held since 2014. In this role, he has responsibility for patient safety and the quality of care at the hospital and has promoted various patient safety initiatives, including the Patient Safety First campaign. Through the Clinical Governance Committee, he has achieved wide stakeholder involvement in promoting the culture of patient safety at Hermitage. Professor Traynor is also the Clinical Director and co-founder of I360 Medical, a medical device innovation company based in Dublin, but with a large international footprint. This company provides a one-stop shop for medical device innovation from initial ideation through to market and clinical practice. He has been the innovator and lead protagonist of the Masters MCH in Surgical Science and Practice. And it's a great pleasure to hand the floor over to Professor Traynor to hear his presentation on this important subject. Thank you, Professor Traynor.
Thanks very much, Professor Corbally, and good evening to everybody in Bahrain. I'll just share my screen. So, good evening to all of you in Bahrain. It's a great pleasure to introduce you to the Masters in Surgical Science and Practice, which is a master's level program delivered full-time over the course of 1 year in RCSI in Dublin. So firstly, I bring you greetings from Ireland. For those who don't know, Ireland is a small island nation situated on the very western extremity of Europe. Despite our small size, we have a considerable sphere of influence in medical education generally, but also in the field of surgical education and training. We're situated approximately 7,000 kilometres from where you are right now. Ireland is a country of great natural beauty, from rugged coastlines and beaches to picturesque countryside and magnificent inland waterways and lakes. The people of Ireland enjoy the good things of life. We're passionate about sport of every type, and we place a high value on family values, quality of life, and work-life balance. Dublin is the capital city of Ireland. Looking at these images, you would think that the sun always shines in Dublin, but unfortunately I can tell you that is far from the case today. We're in the middle of a very heavy storm right now with rain and wind, and unfortunately the blue skies and sunshine doesn't happen that often in Dublin. Situated in the centre of Dublin for more than 200 years is the headquarters of the Royal College of Surgeons in Ireland, RCSI. RCSI was founded in February 1784. Last week, we celebrated the 238th anniversary of the founding of our college on the 11th of February 1784. The college was initially founded for training and examining surgeons. But over the course of almost 240 years, the college has grown way beyond the vision of its founding fathers. And we now have the largest undergraduate medical school in Ireland. We also have undergraduate programs in biomedical science, physiotherapy, and pharmacy. And at postgraduate level, we have programs, obviously, in surgery, but also in radiology, dentistry, healthcare management, sports and exercise medicine, nursing, and physician associates. RCSI is currently designated as a University of Medicine and Health Sciences, and already is in the top 2% of universities worldwide. So according to the Times Higher Education World University Rankings, we are in the top 250 universities in the world. And we are ranked #1 for good health and well-being. We have over 1,000 staff, and we have students from more than 68 countries around the world, including some at our 4 overseas campuses in Malaysia, Bahrain, and Dubai. At the present time, we have more than 21,000 alumni of our college working in 94 countries around the world. In 1996, we set up our first overseas medical school program in Penang in Malaysia. This was a joint venture with University College Dublin, initially called the Penang Medical College, but more recently renamed as the RCSI and UCD Malaysia campus. In 2004, the Medical University of Bahrain was founded. That is your wonderful campus there. And that campus is now fully functional and very, very effective, producing very high quality graduates every year. More recently, the Perdana University RCSI School of Medicine was founded just outside Kuala Lumpur in Malaysia. And we also have a graduate school of healthcare management based in the RCSI Dubai campus. We also have a significant collaboration with COSEXA. COSEXA is the College of Surgeons of East, Central and Southern Africa, and it represents 12 of the poorest countries in sub-Saharan Africa. And we've been working for the past 12 years with COSEXA to develop on-site training programs for surgeons where they can train in their own country without having to travel overseas in order to get their training. But despite all our international activities, the core business of RCSI is still surgical training. Now, over the last 5 years or so, we've been looking at how we might reconfigure surgical training for the future of surgery. And we've been asking ourselves the fundamental question, how should we train the surgeons of tomorrow? And as part of that process, we asked a very fundamental question. How do other activities and careers and businesses train their people for high-risk, mission-critical situations and tasks? So at this stage, I'd like to introduce you to Anusha and Eric. These are 2 astronauts who are just about to depart on their first space mission. Now, although they have never been in space before, they are already fully trained and competent, not only in the technical skills required to actually fly the spacecraft, but also in the non-technical skills required to deal with every conceivable situation which could possibly occur whilst they're in space. And all of that training, every bit of it, has taken place through simulation. It had to, because let's face it, NASA doesn't actually do training flights. The first time you go into space, you are on your own, and you have to be able to manage every situation which could possibly arise. Now, not only have they been trained through simulation, they have also been assessed and assessed and assessed using very robust and objective assessment methodologies. And all of these assessments have been carefully documented and logged so that as they set off on their first space mission, NASA has 100% confidence that they can safely and competently complete their mission. Now, wouldn't it be great if we could do the same thing in surgery? Wouldn't it be great if the first time that a surgeon went into the operating room, she or he already had the skills necessary to perform the surgical procedure and to deal with any unexpected events which might occur during that procedure? And why not? Because actually, astronaut training is not unique at all. We know that the same thing happens in aviation. No commercial airline in the world would allow a trainee pilot anywhere near the cockpit of one of its $300 million aircraft unless they had already completed the vast majority of their training in the flight simulator. And just like the astronauts, they train for both technical skills and non-technical skills or human factors. In fact, the aviation industry were the pioneers of human factors training. And just like the astronauts, they place a major emphasis on assessment and documentation of competence. The same thing happens in the military. The battlefield is not the place to learn military tactics, but instead, military around the world learn by simulation and reenactments of scenarios. Now, I could quote countless other examples from high-risk industries like the nuclear power industry or the oil industry. But my point is simply this. In the 21st century, simulation is the preferred model of training for industries, occupations, or activities that involve a high degree of risk to human life. Now, surgery is an occupation that involves a high degree of risk to human life. But right now, we train our future surgeons using a model of training that was developed not in the 21st century, not in the 20th century, but in the 19th century. The model of training that's used around the world for surgery is a model called apprenticeship. And this is a model of training that was popularized by the great American surgeon William Halsted towards the end of the 19th century at Johns Hopkins Hospital in Baltimore, Maryland. Now, apprenticeship in surgery is no different in principle to apprenticeship in any other craft-based discipline, whether it's carpentry, plumbing, or electricity. Essentially, an apprentice or trainee is attached to a master or trainer, and they learn first by watching the master at work, then by doing parts of tasks under supervision, then by doing full tasks under supervision, and then by doing full tasks under progressively less supervision until they are deemed competent to perform the tasks independently. That's what apprenticeship is. That's how it works. And in truth, apprenticeship has served us very well in surgical training and has produced countless generations of fine surgeons all around the world. But there are two key ingredients which are essential for the success of the apprenticeship model. The first of these is the opportunity to engage in a large volume of repeated practice, and that involves working long hours over many years. The second is the relationship that develops between trainer and trainee, a very close working relationship whereby the trainer really gets to know the trainee and know their strengths and their weaknesses and their learning needs. And competence is deemed to be equivalent to time spent in training. Now, although apprenticeship has served us very well, there are challenges for this traditional apprenticeship model at the present time. Firstly, around the world, there are pressures to reduce the duration of surgical training and to make it more streamlined and more efficient. And at precisely the same time, there are pressures to restrict the number of hours that a trainee works in any given week. In Europe, we now have a 48-hour working week. That's the maximum number of hours that trainees are allowed to work per week. And that compares to well over 100 hours just 20 years ago. So these two factors have impacted significantly on those two key ingredients that I spoke about: the opportunity to engage in a large volume of repeated practice and the fundamental close relationship between trainer and trainee. But there's more. We know that technology is an increasingly important part of surgical practice. And the more complex the technology becomes, the more difficult it is for trainees, particularly more junior trainees, to actually perform the surgical procedures. In many hospitals in Europe, there are very clearly defined service targets which make decreased time available for training. In our part of the world, we see regular cancellation of elective surgery due to pressure on the emergency departments and a priority for emergency admissions over elective surgery. And finally, there are changing public expectations. The public no longer wish to be used as training material for junior surgeons. And quite understandably, they want their surgery to be performed by the most senior, most experienced member of the surgical team. And finally, regulatory bodies around the world are increasingly requiring us to verify and document the competence of trainees at the time of finishing their training. So the healthcare environment in which we work is very, very complex, and it's becoming more complex by the year. We know that technology is an increasingly important component of surgical practice. Technologies such as robotic surgery, advanced minimally invasive surgery, microsurgery, and 3D bioprinting for surgery. These are all radically changing the way that we deliver surgical care for our patients. But those technologies bring challenges in training. We also know that within the next few years, artificial intelligence is going to dramatically change the practice of surgery. It's going to have a profound change, unlike any change that we've seen in the last 100 years. But the people involved in surgery are also changing. 40 or 50 years ago, the surgical team consisted of a surgeon, anaesthetists, and nurses. Today, the surgical team is a much larger, multi-professional, multidisciplinary team, and includes not only surgeons and anaesthetists and nurses, but also many other allied healthcare professionals. Our surgeons of the future will have to be trained to work effectively as part of this multidisciplinary, multi-professional team. And our patients are also changing. Our patients are becoming increasingly elderly, and increasingly they have more complex comorbidities and are on many, many more medications than happened 30 or 40 years ago. And so in this changing environment, relationships, interpersonal relationships, are going to be much more important than they have ever been in the past. And this needs to be taken into account in the surgical training programs that we devise for the future. And finally, as if that wasn't enough change, the processes around healthcare are becoming ever more complex. And our surgeons of the future will need to understand the language of these complex healthcare processes. So they will need to have basic knowledge about healthcare economics, healthcare management, process improvement and lean, clinical governance and patient safety, information technology, surgical innovation, and global surgery. So what should we do? Well, firstly, we need to define much more precisely the competencies that we expect from our surgeons at the time when they complete their training. We need to integrate simulation into the curriculum, just as they do in every other high-risk industry in the world. We need to professionalize our trainers so that they have the teaching and education skills required to train our trainees. We need to take assessment much more seriously, and we need a surgical pathway in which progression is based on defined achievement of competencies. So for the next few minutes, I'm going to focus on simulation and the integration of simulation into the curriculum for surgical training. At RCSI in Dublin, we recently completed the development of a very large 10-story educational facility, and the top 3 stories, the top 3 floors of that building are dedicated exclusively to simulation. So there's 3,300 square meters of simulation space on the top 3 floors. On the 5th floor, we have a large biological or wet lab where we can use biological tissue, cadaveric tissue from animal cadavers or human cadavers. And there's also a dry lab where we use high-end virtual reality simulators. On the 4th floor, we have a fully equipped mock operating room and 8 inpatient simulation rooms. And then on the 3rd floor, we have 10 outpatient or consultation rooms. These are just some images from the wet lab on our top floor. Within the wet lab, there are 12 stations, each of which is equipped just like an operating theatre in a real hospital. So there are theatre lights, theatre table, and all the services and monitors that you would have in a fully equipped operating theatre in the hospital. At each of our 12 stations, we have 2 video recorders, 2 video cameras, which can record everything that happens during the surgical procedure, so that the trainees can be given structured feedback and debriefing at the end of their lesson and at the end of the surgical procedure. And all of those recordings are stored on a commercial learning management system called Learning Space. So the trainees can access their own videos and can watch them at a later stage, and they can monitor their own progress over time. And we can monitor the progress of individual trainees and compare their progress to the progress of their peers who are at the same level of training. Every year we have a variety of assessments for our trainees. So each year they have assessments, and their assessments are documented, and they count towards career progression. Now, as surgeons, the environment in which we work is complex. The complex environment is one in which complex interactions take place between human beings and other human beings on the one hand, and between human beings and machines or technology on the other hand. In such a complex environment, the potential for adverse events to occur, critical events to occur, is enormous. And the way that we behave at the time of those critical adverse events has a profound impact on clinical outcomes and patient safety. In a nutshell, that's what human factors is all about. It's about the way that we interact with our environment, with other human beings, and with machines or technology, and the impact of that interaction on clinical outcomes and patient safety. At RCSI, we place a major emphasis on the importance of human factors or non-technical skills training for all of our surgical trainees. So all surgical trainees in Ireland come to our simulation centre 3 times every year throughout their training for human factors training. And they participate in realistic scenarios in the operating room or the emergency department or the intensive care unit. The Human Factors programme has components such as personality and behaviour, human performance and error, teamwork and leadership, communication skills, negotiation and conflict resolution, decision-making and judgment, and various aspects of human overload. Where possible, we deliver the human factors training utilising the full team. So not just surgical trainees, but also trainees in anaesthesia and postgraduate nursing. We have realistic simulations in which there's a preliminary briefing, then the practical exercise or simulation, and then a debriefing based on video recordings of what happens during the scenario. And there's regular reinforcement. Because they come 3 times every year throughout the 8 years of their training, there's an opportunity for regular reinforcement of what they learn. Now, a lot of our training in the Human Factors programme is done using high-end patient mannequins, and these can very realistically recreate trauma situations, burns, stabbing, road traffic accidents. But increasingly, we're relying on what we call simulated patients. These are members of the public who have volunteered to become simulated patients, and they're specifically trained for that purpose. And on these members of the public, we can recreate moulage. We can place wounds and stabbings and burns on the patients using materials that we have in-house and that are prepared by our simulation technician team. We also have an app for our surgical trainees, a smartphone app called M-Surgery. So this is an app that's available to all surgical trainees, and it has a wealth of educational resources for our surgical trainees, including videos of all the commonly performed surgical procedures and surgical techniques that trainees need to know. They also have access to the electronic library of RCSI. They can also access their electronic logbook. They can book their classes, and they can get access to the policies and supports available for surgical trainees. We also use what we call next generation educational technologies. Technologies such as augmented reality and 3D virtual reality. Now, about 3 years ago, we decided to package all of this together in an academic program called the Masters in Surgical Science and Practice. So that is a one-year full-time program, which is based entirely on simulation. It's a master's level program which is fully accredited by the National University of Ireland. It's a level 9 program attracting 90 ECTS credits. As I said, it's a one-year full-time course which is delivered entirely in our state-of-the-art simulation facilities at RCSI in the centre of Dublin. And it's aimed primarily at recent medical graduates, graduates who have just graduated from medical school, or those who have completed their internship and wish to embark on a surgical residency training program. The program has 5 modules: core knowledge and clinical judgment, clinical skills, technical skills, non-technical skills, and professional development. For core knowledge and clinical judgment, we have simulated multidisciplinary team meetings, MDT meetings, with involvement of clinicians, both surgeons and oncologists, and radiologists and pathologists. We also have case-based discussion and surgical forum. We have a basic sciences bootcamp, which includes anatomy, physiology, and pathology. We have weekly grand rounds and grand rounds extra, and we have a fortnightly journal club. For module 2, the clinical skills, we have simulated ward rounds, and they are interprofessional ward rounds. So they include not only the surgical trainees who are participating in this program, but also some nursing trainees or pharmacy trainees or physiotherapy trainees. We also have simulated outpatient clinics, simulated nights on call in the emergency department, or ward rounds in the intensive care unit or high dependency unit. The most comprehensive part of the program is the technical skills component. And over the course of the year, you will learn all of the basic techniques and basic surgical procedures expected to be learned during the first 3 years of any residency program. So it's a very concentrated technical skills program. You spend 10 hours every week in the surgical skills lab, learning technical skills, using a variety of models, both cadaveric models or biological specimens or high-end virtual reality simulators. Module 4 is the non-technical skills or human factors. And that is also a very comprehensive program, which is delivered in our simulation facility and is usually delivered in the mock operating room, where they have high-end reenactments of trauma scenarios and other situations. The final module is the professional development, module 5, and that covers 8 submodules: healthcare economics, healthcare management, clinical governance and patient safety, information technology, surgical innovation, research methodology, global surgery, and professionalism and ethical practice. So you can see that this is a really comprehensive program which recreates everything that happens in the real hospital environment, except that it's entirely done through simulation, where there is no risk to any patients, but you get very, very intensive tuition with feedback and coaching. So I'm going to show you a short video which summarizes the main elements of the master's program.
Professor Trainer, I'm not sure if the audio is coming through there, if other people can hear it.
No, I can't hear it. I think it's not coming through.
Sorry, the audio is not coming through?
No.
No.
Just the visual. Yeah.
Oh, okay. All right. Well, then we might just skip on. We've covered most of what's in that video anyway. So just to finish off, the entry requirements for the Masters in Surgical Science and Practice, basically you have to have your MB, BCH, BAO degree, and you have to have the Certificate of English Language. So the English Language Certificate is a requirement. The programme commences in August each year. We'll be starting our 4th iteration of this programme in August of this year. And it is a really good grounding for surgical residency in any part of the world. And so we invite you to be part of it. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Professor Trainer, for that very comprehensive overview of the Masters in Surgical Science and Practice. Clearly, it's a very comprehensive course, and clearly we are probably at the forefront of the future right now in terms of surgical training and the requirement to change. We're very privileged to have Dr. Shahir Khan with us today, who's currently enrolled on the program and is one of our students here from Bahrain. And I'd like to turn over the floor to Dr. Khan, who will just give us a brief overview of his experience, hopefully positive, in the program. Shahir.
Thank you, Professor Martin, and thank you, Professor Trainer and the RCSI administration for this opportunity. I just want to share a story. Back when I was doing my internship at King Hamad University Hospital in Bahrain, I was asked one day in OT to put in a catheter. Now, in the stress of that situation, obviously every consultant waiting, they're not going to do the operation until you do this. This was my first or maybe second time that I'd ever put a catheter in. But because we'd practiced it so many times in RCSI as an undergraduate student, I knew the steps. I knew what I had to do. And even with all the stress, new environment, everything, I was able to put it in. I knew what I was doing, and that showed. And I managed to successfully put in a catheter, and we continued the surgery. Later on in the same surgery, I was asked to put it, when we were closing, I was luckily asked by the consultant to come just let the intern close. So I stepped forward and they asked me, do you know what a horizontal mattress suture is? I'd never even heard of such a thing. And luckily I was still given the opportunity. They taught me in the spot and they taught me how to do it. And I managed to do it at the end, but I wasn't comfortable. Like I felt that there was something lacking. There was something missing. And I wondered why there was a gap in that. And I think it was because I was never formally taught how to do it. And I think just as how Professor Trainer said in his presentation, surgery has been taught through this apprentice model where it takes time. You join someone, and through time, through exposure, you learn skills and you learn how to practice surgery. But when I heard about this program, the MSSP, I realized that this is what I was looking for. This was an opportunity, a concentrated opportunity for me to learn about the technical skills which are needed to become a surgeon, but also the other skills of how what other skills are required to be a surgeon as well. And I've really enjoyed the program so far because I feel that the gap in my technical skills that I found while I was working has been filled. There's a lot of basic things that has been taught, and on top of that, we've been exposed to so many advanced procedures as well. I'm currently in the new campus on 26 York Street, and upstairs right now, we were just doing an open inguinal hernia repair. And I think as an SHO, you'd only be able to assist, but here we're given the opportunity not only just to practice the steps and to see how it's done, but we're also given the opportunity to do some of these procedures ourselves. We've done bowel anastomosis, we've done vascular anastomosis, and these are things that I feel that if most surgical trainees take time to be given the opportunity to do this, and luckily through the program, we've been given access to these procedures. On top of that, as Professor Trainer mentioned as well, the program has a lot of other aspects which are covered. We have our surgical forms, our MDTs, our weekly ward rounds, our nights on call. These all simulate what it's like to be a doctor and a surgeon in a hospital. On top of that, the technical skills that were the non-technical skills that we're taught are a very good adjunct and very important to becoming a surgeon as well. We're taught communication skills, teamwork, leadership, and these are things which I think if you go through your internship or you've ever worked in a hospital, you'll see the difference between the people who are different, who are at a higher level. And I think what sets them apart is their non-technical skills. And through the program, this is what we're taught formally, and I think it really makes a difference. My favorite module by far has to be Module 5, which is professional development. We're exposed to biostatistics, human economics, professionalism, research methods, global surgery. Prior to joining, I had no idea that RCSI had such a good connection with global surgery and CASEXA. And I'm very honored that I'm part of an organization. I've gone through a course where we formally have links with some of the professors and some of the people who are on the ground, who are working in the third world, and I hopefully one day I'll be able to add to that as well. Dublin is a capital city, but in some ways it feels like a town. I'm very happy to call it home. Public transport is fantastic. Everything is accessible. Ireland itself is it's beautiful. I think once you leave Dublin, you'll see why they call it the Emerald Isle. I've been to Dunleary, I've been to Howth, Killiney, I've gone to Galway, I've gone to Letterkenny, and it's just lovely wherever you go. I think overall, just to sum it up, I really feel the difference. I think that taking this year out and joining this course, I feel the difference with my surgical skills. I feel a lot of procedures that I feel that it would have taken a long time for me to get access to if I was in training. And on top of that, I feel that I've experienced how surgery works as a mechanism. So, how it works in the real world through MDTs, through the forums, through research, and what the point of all of these mechanisms are. So I'm very grateful for this opportunity, and I've loved the MSSP, and I do hope that everyone back home in Bahrain is doing well. And if you are also interested in surgery, this program will definitely take you to another level. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Khan. Clearly, Dr. Khan is going to graduate with honors.
I hope so.
Okay, thank you very much, Shahir. Indeed, and for the very, very sincere and heartfelt words, and I'm delighted to hear you say all of those things. We have a number of pre-submitted questions, so I'm just going to read out those questions, and for the most part, I'll address them to Professor Traynor, but if anybody has a question specifically for Shahir, you can type the question in the chat box, and we will come to you. So the first question is there an opportunity for students to join this program directly out of medical school rather than a year of clinical practice and then applying?
Okay, so yes, absolutely. The only requirements are that you have an MB degree, so you must have graduated, and you must pass your English language test if you have gone through a medical school where English is not the first language. But yes, you can go directly from graduation onto this program. If you are thinking of working in Ireland afterwards, it probably makes more sense to do your internship first, as Shahir did, and then come and do the program. But it certainly would make it a lot easier to work in Ireland if you'd already done your internship and then did the program. It's just more straightforward to get registered with the medical council.
Yeah, I think too, Oscar, that it's generally good advice that you do your internship first, because for lots of logistical reasons, that it's hard to get back into an internship program if you've missed a year or two. So it's better to do it first, and then perhaps. But there's no obstruction to doing it, going straight into the program if they so desire.
Correct.
Yeah. I'm just interested to know the pathway to this program if a student does BCH from RCSI. Just Oscar, I think that's just a question of the registration process, I think. After graduation.
The question, the pathway to the program?
I'm just interested to know the pathway to this program if a student does BCH from RCSI. MBBC, that's the medical graduate degree.
Okay.
So
yeah, well, yeah. So I guess it's pretty much the same answer, really. The advice would probably be to do your internship first and then to do the program. But as we've already said, there's no blockage to you doing it directly out of medical school if people so choose.
So the basic requirement is a medical degree.
Correct, yeah.
What do your simulated nights on call entail? Perhaps Shahir might be best to answer that.
Yes, Shahir probably would answer that. I know he did one there just last week. So.
Yes, so I was just on call. We basically are sent into 3 scenarios. So these, if you're on call in a hospital, it's, you know, you'd like things to be quiet, and it's very, you'd hope that it doesn't get too busy, but for you to experience a sudden or an acute event, it wouldn't be very common. But because we're simulating these nights on call, these will be acute situations that you may not encounter every time that you're on call. So I remember we had a patient who came in after a road traffic accident, and they were having difficulty breathing, and I was asked to assess the patient, and after assessing the patient, I was asked to put in a chest tube. So they set up one simulation like that. Another simulation is a patient is post-op, they're in the ward after their surgery, and suddenly they're having, difficulty breathing. And then you have to assess the patient and resuscitate them and call your seniors. There's another patient who is having urinary obstruction. They've come in from the community, they have a catheter. So these are all scenarios that we've faced so far, and you wouldn't face this normally in one night. You could if it's unfortunate, but because we have.
Do you have to spend the entire night in the simulated area, or can you go home at 10 or 11 o'clock?
I think we wanted to initially make it so that we would be here, and it simulate also the tiredness that you'd feel of being a doctor. But since RCSI is I think the second or the top university when it comes to work-life balance, they did ask us to leave at around 10. But we had the experience. We were given the simulated experience of being on call and managing 3 acute situations.
Okay, thank you. What is expectation of each student regarding the research project we must undergo in second semester? And will we be given any assistance in finding PIs, principal investigators, or given the freedom to source a supervising PI outside the RCSI network? Professor Traynor.
Okay, so this is really an introduction to research. So we provide a sub-module, 5 weeks course on research methodology, which covers all the basic methods of research, of clinical research. And then the students are encouraged to do a research project. Now, obviously, it's not a laboratory-based research project. It's not a PhD. It's really an introduction to the principles of research and the practical application of the principles that they learn during the course. So Shahir, you might expand on that, but certainly there's plenty of support for the trainees doing their research. There's somebody allocated to take responsibility for each of the trainees, and they get plenty of support and mentorship on the research project.
Yeah, absolutely, Professor. As mentioned in the beginning, we were asked to fill out a form which just stated our interests, so that our research would be based on which subspecialty of surgery you'd be interested in. And then we're attached to our supervisors who help us pick out a topic, our plan on how we're going to do it, and then also we have meetings which are scheduled with them so that we can make sure that we can complete the project. And then also some of them are interested in publishing the research as well. And I found that very, very helpful and very nice.
Okay, thank you very much. And does an MCH SSP degree influence the number of years to be spent as a surgical resident?
No, not at the present time, but it certainly makes trainees much more confident in starting their surgical residency. So I would say that most people who've graduated from the program can hit the ground running much earlier than if they hadn't done the program. It's a very good foundation, a very good basis for starting surgical residency.
Okay. Are there scholarship options for this program?
No, not at the present time. We would love to be in a position to offer scholarships, but at the present time, we don't have scholarships.
Okay. we've answered this question already, which is when does the surgical program start for the batch of 2022, which is August.
August, yeah.
Next question would be, why should medical graduates make the decision to pursue this master's versus a direct transition to residency internship?
Really for the same reasons that we've mentioned already. It really is a very good foundation for residency. So you can imagine that if a first-year resident goes into a hospital and they already can tie knots and close wounds and manage chest drains and manage catheters and close an abdomen, their trainer will have much more confidence in them from the very beginning, and therefore will let them do more stuff from the very beginning. So it's really something that helps you to progress at a much quicker rate in your residency.
I have a question that I'll add to this, actually. Have you had feedback from residency trainers, from graduates of the course who've gone into surgical residency training, to augment that point that you just made, that they hit the ground running, they're better equipped to deal with the basics at an earlier stage, and perhaps then at a more advanced stage? And have you had formal feedback about that?
Yes, absolutely. We've had quite a lot of feedback from consultant trainers who have had graduates from this program, and the overwhelming response is that these trainees are great. They can't believe. In the beginning, some of them didn't realize that these trainees had done a master's program, and they were wondering how come they're suddenly getting such wonderful trainees.
Great.
And then they realized the reason why.
That's great. That's good. I mean, there's a research opportunity there, actually, to review the performance assessment versus the normal, shall we say, entry graduate. Does the program include research, stroke extracurricular, stroke clinical opportunities?
Well, the research bit, I think we've covered. Clinical opportunities, no, that's not part of the program. Most of the people who do the program are not registered with the Medical Council in Ireland. So to do the program, you're a postgraduate student. You're not registered to work as a doctor whilst you're doing the program. And therefore, it's not really possible to have clinical commitments as part of this program.
But you are entitled to have a student immigration visa for that year in Ireland.
Yes, yeah.
And the college will take care of all of that.
Well, the students have to do most of that work themselves. We will give them plenty of advice and support, but the groundwork, unfortunately, has to be done by the students themselves.
Is it a difficult process, Shahir?
I think my experience may be different because of COVID, but I was supported throughout my whole experience, and it was never too much of an issue.
Okay, great. Is the degree recognized in Malaysia for surgical specialty?
That I don't know. I don't know, Shahir, do you know the answer to that? Probably not, you don't. I don't know that for sure, but we will find out the answer to that, and we'll reply to that question. I presume that question came in on email, so we'll reply to that question over the next few days.
Okay, how do I apply for this master's program at RCSI, and what is the application process like? When can we start applying for it, and how do I prepare?
Okay, well, now is the time to apply. So we've already filled 10 places out of 24 for next year. So it's filling up fast. The closing date is not until, I think it's the end of May, but the applications are open at the moment. And what I would say to anyone who's online today who's interested in the program, get your application in, because once the program is full, then there won't be any possibility, even if it fills up before the closing date, it won't be possible to get a place once the program is full. So it is filling up very, very rapidly this year, and I would strongly recommend people to apply ASAP.
What's the maximum number of places available, Professor?
24 for the coming year.
24. Okay, 24. Okay, good. A question from Dr. Madiha. The course is 1 year full-time. Dr. Keita Ibrahima Khalil, I'm doing a master's degree in general surgery in Egypt. I'm a second-year student. Is it possible to get a training program in your department for 6 months?
Not for this program. This program is a one-year program. Well, it's one academic year. It starts in late August and it finishes around the third week of June. So it's basically 10 months.
10 months. Okay. Does having 2 to 3 years of surgical experience as an SHO, is that considered overqualification for this program, from Dr. Ahmed?
It's not. The program is primarily aimed at people who've just finished their internship or just graduated from medical school. But we have had many people on the program over the past 3 years who have already done 1, 2, or even 3 years of surgical training before doing the program. So it's not a barrier to doing the program, but it is mostly aimed at people who are recent graduates.
Who haven't acquired any bad habits, in other words.
Correct. Yes.
Okay, and from Dr. Uda Kabasi, can I defer my resumption date to November if I cannot make it by August? I'm undergoing a mandatory service year for my country and will be done by October. I don't wish to defer it to the next year and I'm quite concerned I might have to.
Okay, so it would be very challenging to start that late. So this year we have had some students started later than August because of the COVID pandemic.
Yeah.
But they all participated online. So even though they weren't physically present, they were participating online. So if the person who asked that question is saying, could they start in November, having not done anything for the 3 months before that, that would be pretty much impossible.
Difficult, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, but is it possible to consider for some people maybe a tailored online portion of the course and then followed up with a more face-to-face participation?
We could certainly look at that, but I do stress again, and I'm sure Shahir will say, this is a full-time program. So it's not really something you can do part-time whilst doing something else, doing your mandatory national service. It would be really difficult to do that. It is a full-time commitment. Like the students are there from 8 a.m. until 5 or 6 p.m. 5 days a week. It's pretty full-time.
Like a regular job. Like a regular job.
It's like a regular job, correct.
So Dr. Madia, again, the program is only from Dublin, not from Bahrain.
At the present time, we hope in sometime in the future that we will run the program in Bahrain.
Thank you very much, Professor Trainer. That'd be wonderful. So, Doctor, what's the fees for this course? I think perhaps the best. Can you want to discuss that now, or we could refer them to the website?
Yes, everything is on the website. Yeah. But like I can tell you, the fee is €26,500 per year.
Okay. So if you have any further questions or looking for further information, can I suggest that you look on www.rcsi.ie/MSSP, and all the information will be there. But I'm sure that all the participants will be getting emails from Rebecca and Evan to actually consolidate the questions and any information that they require. So, I have one more question from Ahmed, Dr. Ahmed. I have an active IMC registration. Will I be able to have some clinical attachment? I think that's outside the course.
It's outside the course, yeah.
Yeah. That would be outside the course, and it would not be possible. Well, what a fantastic presentation, Professor Trainer. Very informative. I think it's a wonderful course, and hopefully that you'll have lots of interests and perhaps able to expand both the numbers in Dublin and hopefully open in Bahrain at some point. I'd like to thank Dr. Khan for his wonderful input. No one was twisting his arm, I assure you. He was totally speaking from the heart. And I'd like to thank Rebecca, Porrig, Tevin, and Paula for their administrative input into making this a very successful presentation. Thank you very much. Thank you, Oscar. Thank you, Shahir.
Thanks, everybody. Thank you for
so much.
Thank you for hosting us. Thank you.
Pleasure. Take care. Take care. Stay safe, everyone.
Thank you.